All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for clicking on the video today. As you can see by the title, Mortal Kombat on Game Boy versus the Mortal Kombat on the Sega Game Gear. Now, do you have any memories of these games growing up? Because I sure do. Mortal Kombat on the Game Boy was the first version of Mortal Kombat I ever owned. And let me tell you, when I was younger, loved it. Played the hell out of it, loved it. I remember beating it. I remember beating it and using Goro. I remember getting the code to use Goro after, and I loved it as a kid. The Game Gear version I ended up getting later, and I remember playing that. I remember specifically playing that more on on road trips, and I remember that because the Game Gear, the 6 AA batteries lasted about 45 minutes, and I remember always being let down. I remember playing through maybe once or twice. I specifically remember playing it with Johnny Cage and beating it and having the batteries die as the credits rolled. So that's a memory for Mortal Kombat 1 that I have on Game Gear for myself. But anyways, once again, we're gonna do a comparison here and see which is better. We're gonna do 4 categories once again: graphics, sound, controls, and overall fun factor. You know what? Let's get right into it. Let's do a bit of gameplay for the Game Boy, and we'll do a bit of Game Gear. And you know, like the other comparison videos I've done, we'll talk a bit about it during gameplay, and then we will do ultimately a review and the final verdict when it's all done. So that being said, let's get right into it, and let's check out the graphics for the Game Boy, and then the Game Gear, and then talk about it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mortal Kombat 1 on the Game Boy. Let's take a look at graphics first. Funky music. All right. Now keep in mind, look at that, you even got EJB at the bottom. Now keep in mind this is blown up on a 50-inch TV. It is going to look more pixelated than it would on a smaller screen, but that's okay. We can still give a fair review regardless. So graphically, you can tell who's who. You know, I can see Sub-Zero, Sonya. Sonya looks like she's got black eyes in this, but you know, you can tell who's who in this. So let's play through one round. Let's do it with let's do it with Scorpion, just because his fatality, which I mean I won't be able to pull off probably, but let's do it with him because his fatality stays true to the arcade. And let's look at graphics. So Kano, Sonya, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, you can tell it's them. You know, you don't need color for that. Here we go. So start is block. No, sorry, start isn't block. The B and A together is block. Graphically, you know this is the pit level. The jump kicks always keep the... Oh my goodness. My eye is twitching right now. The jump kick is always a straight up jump kick. You'll notice the animation isn't any different. 37 seconds left. My goodness, the time really flies in this. Trying to pull off a harpoon. Can't really seem to do it. Okay, well, anyways, this is about graphics right now. And graphically, you know, for an 8-bit black and white or green and white system, graphically it's not too bad. You can tell who's who. You know, you got the moon in the background there. At least they included that. Look at that. See that evasion of the uppercut? Ooh, and again, sweep, uppercut, sweep, uppercut. Now, Scorpion's finisher in this is not the same as it is on the arcade or the Super Nintendo. You can't hold block and push up. I don't think I haven't pulled off one harpoon. None of the moves are the same. At least I don't... Oh, there we go. No, back, punch. Finally got a harpoon out. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Graphics. Let's see. I can't remember what the heck the finishing move was. Graphically, you know it's Mortal Kombat. That's all I gotta say about that. All right, let's check out the Game Gear and see what the graphics are like on that. Sega. All right, let's take a look at Mortal Kombat for the Game Gear and check out what the graphics are like for this one. Arena Entertainment presents a Probe development. Now, we all know how Probe handled Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 on the Sega Genesis. But here we go. The word code has many different definitions. There is, in fact, a blood code for this version, which was a huge plus to having this one. So the code for this one is simply BAB up down, or BAB down up, or ABA up down. It's one of those. There we go. So I got it. Yeah, I just kind of, I remember that from when I was younger. No music right here. Not a big deal. You know, Game Gear was color. Game Boy was green and white. You see the animation here. It actually looks pretty good. So graphically, this version already looks really good. You know, decent colors. The music is, you know, twangy. Sonya doesn't have darkened eyes, so, you know, she actually has pupils in this one. We're going to use Sub-Zero. We are definitely playing on easy because, if I remember correctly, these games were notoriously hard on the Game Boy and Game Gear. So, everything looks good here so far. Graphically, you know, you got Johnny Cage in this one. You got Kano in the Game Boy version. Not a big deal. It was a bit of a swap there. Not sure why they did that. But, anyways, here we go. So, graphically, game looks like hot garbage, but it doesn't look that bad, to be honest. You got the blood there, nice and red. You know, she's frozen, she's blue, you can tell. Sub-Zero wins. But graphically, Goro's lair looks like Goro's lair. I can't remember, is the skeleton on the wall in this? Up back. Yeah, the skeleton is on the wall. So they put, you know, they put decent detail into this. You know, when Sub-Zero freezes, she looks frozen. I'm not sure what his slide is on the Game Gear version. And there you have it. Rips the head off. You can tell what's going on. Graphically, looks very good. Let's talk about it. All right. So what a mess. When you know what, because the rating system here is out of 5, we got to take into consideration the platform that it's being played on. All right, because obviously a 4 out of 5 on Game Boy isn't going to be the same as a 4 out of 5 on Super Nintendo. So let's keep that in mind. All right. Graphically, the sprites are big now. Because it's blown up on a big screen TV, obviously it's going to look more pixelated and big. But remember, the Game Boy screen was tiny, the Game Gear screen was tiny. So when everything was condensed, it looked a lot less blocky. Okay, so keep that in mind. They both did a good job graphically. Game Boy looked good. Yeah, Game Boy looked good. Did it look great in comparison to other games on the Game Boy? You know, like games like Mario and stuff. It's hard to compare a game like Mortal Kombat on Game Boy to a game like Super Mario, for instance, on Game Boy. Just because, you know, Mortal Kombat used digitized graphics in the arcade and, you know, they wanted that kind of realistic look on the Game Boy. So, all things considered, you know what? Graphically on Game Boy, I think they did a good job graphically. While it's choppy and such. You know, the movement's really choppy. I think, well, I'm not going to say it's the best they could do, because Mortal Kombat 2, which we will get into later on Game Boy, was a huge upgrade, I think, from Mortal Kombat 1. But again, graphically, all things considered, they only fit 2 stages in on the Game Boy, and you know, 2 stages on the Game Gear. But the graphics themselves, the characters themselves looked pretty decent. You knew who they were. The stances were correct. And because of that, you know what, I didn't think the graphics were that bad. So for Game Boy, we're going to give it a 3 out of 5. And the Game Gear just looks better, obviously, because it has color. You know, putting in that blood code gave it, you know, even more color. The red was always nice, having that splash of red in there. So graphically, Game Gear takes it 4 out of 5. And I think pretty much everyone will agree on that. I might even be giving Game Boy a little too high for graphics, but regardless, 3 on Game Boy and a 4 for the Game Gear. So, what did these games sound like? Well, you heard a bit in that first little clip there that we showed of both games. But let's take another round out of both, and let's talk about the sound after. All right, let's talk about the sound on the Game Boy. This little tune here is actually very catchy, I find. I like it, to be honest. The background here, you know, you can see the monks in the back. That's another graphic mention. But anyways, all right. So the sound, I think there's three levels, or 3 basically beats. Is it beats? No, there's 3 different tracks, I think, in this game, and that's pretty much it. 2 levels and then the intro, or the character select screen. There we go, we got that harpoon in. The big win for Scorpion right there. The sound isn't terrible. It gets repetitive. At least, you know, the music restarts for every level. That's good. I'm gonna try to get a fatality off here if I can. I mean, if I can win. So overall, the music is, you know, the sound is to be expected. There's no get over here. No, the sound effects for the uppercuts is pretty small. The hit detection, or hit contact, or whatever sound effects, not terrible. Oh, there we go. We did get a finisher. Excellent. Music doesn't change for the finishing move, though. Bit of a letdown. There you go. Flawless. And there you go. For the finishing move, it does change the music, so you know you pulled off that finishing move, and you get the points for it. But the sound, not terrible, not great. Let's check out what the sound on the Game Gear is like. All right, the sound on the Game Gear. What'd you think of the Game Boy? Not bad, not bad. Let's listen to this. Sounds pretty good, to be honest. So no speech in this, not a big deal. That wasn't to be expected. Ice Ball sounds cute. The music is pretty much on par with the Game Boy, I think. The sound effects for hit detection are tiny, but they were tiny systems. You know, the music for Flawless Victory is cool. I think overall sound in this is pretty good. Not terrible. Oh, it's back, and then A and B for the slide. Overall, I think the sound is pretty good in this. It's pretty much on par with the Game Boy. There is no pit fatality. Look at the screen, even darkened there. Going back to graphics. But yeah, overall sound is, you know, what you'd expect from a little tiny system. in comparison to the Game Boy. It's actually very close, I find. Let's talk about it. All right, are your ears bleeding? Did you have to wipe them up after listening to the atrociousness of both of those? You know what? Let's be realistic here. I'm not gonna lie. The Game Boy, when it fires up and that theme song starts playing, it actually sounds really cool. And you know what? Not gonna lie. On the Game Gear, that intro, or there's silence, but once the game starts playing and you get to that character select screen, music's awesome. I love the character select music, and I love the intro and the character select music for both platforms. Both games are pretty much equal for sound. The punching and the kicking and the sound effects, the contact noise when you hit your opponent and stuff. I mean, remember, it was coming out of a tiny little speaker. I mean, unless you had headphones on, there was only so much they could do for sound on these platforms. And you know what? The sound on both was actually very good for what it was. I found not great. However, the music was pretty repetitive. Yeah, the music was pretty repetitive. There was only, like I said, 2 stages, so they only had so much music in the game. When you pulled off a fatality, the music didn't change or anything, which what do you expect, right? When we were kids playing those, it didn't matter. Just pulling off a fatality was a great thing, or pulling off a finishing move on Game Boy. On Game Boy, that was a huge deal because those finishing moves are impossible to pull off. But that's for the next topic or category. So overall sound, I think on both, considering the limitations of the systems themselves, I'm going to give them equally 3 out of 5 for sound on both. And yeah, it is what it is. So here's the big one. The controls. The controls on the Game Boy and the controls on the Game Gear. Let's play another round and then talk about that for a little bit afterwards. That should be interesting. All right, let's talk about the controls on the Game Boy. I don't think I need to tell you, this is frustrating. Now, I was wrong. There's 3 stages in the Game Boy. This is Goro's Lair, obviously. Well, I don't know if it is obvious, but it is Goro's Lair. I failed to mention, I couldn't even pull off a friggin' uppercut there. I'm pushing the button and nothing was happening. Yeah, so there's 3 stages in this one. So graphically, when I said there was 2 stages, there's 3. And when I said there was music, well, this is the same music as the first stage as well. So yeah, the music tracks are, there's not a heck of a lot. But anyways, the controls. The controls on the Game Boy version are god-awful. Very bad. There's a huge delay in input controls. And because of that, there's not a lot to say other than the controls suck on the Game Boy. They really do. I'm going to try to beat Kano here and pull off that fatality again. But Scorpion's fatality in this is forward, block. Thank goodness they give you a few seconds to do it, because there's no way you're going to pull that off, in a second and a half or whatever it is that they give you in the other versions of Mortal Kombat, the more arcade-style versions. See your distance too. I couldn't move back in the screen there, so you need the range for it as well. Bottom line is, controls suck for this version. Let's check out what they're like for the Game Gear now. All right, now the most important factor in this comparison video, this review. How does the Game Gear control in comparison to the Game Boy? Well, let me tell you something right now. Uppercut, boom, uppercut, down, punch, no problem. Sweep, it's responsive. Ice ball, oh, roundhouse kick. Everything is doing exactly what I want it to do. relatively easy. You know, if I want to block is pretty much spot on. You know, you can block moves pretty easily. Now, I don't tend to block as much in this one just because I find you don't really have to. But the controls are great, considering what I just went through with the Game Boy. You know, fatalities are easy to pull off. They're exactly like their arcade counterparts. You know, forward down forward punch for Sub-Zero. You rip the head off. It's pretty easy to pull off. So the controls on the Game Gear version are fantastic. Let's talk about it. All right, the controls. Now, the Game Boy, the controls suck. 1 out of 5. Not much to say about that. It was a very, very frustrating game to try playing once again. I don't know how I got used to it back in the day. I don't know how I had fun with it back in the day. But, you know, as kids, we adapted, and because that was the only platform I had it on for a little bit, I got used to it, and I ended up loving it. But the controls are absolutely horrendous. They don't respond. You need a really, it's like a 3-to-1 type thing. Like you push the control, and then like 3 seconds later, it seems to respond. God awful. They really messed up with that on the Game Boy. So you know, 1 out of 5. It should be a 0, but I'm gonna give it a 1 out of 5 just because it does move. So I mean, pulling off a fatality or a finishing move back in the day, you know, it was like winning the lottery. It was the greatest thing ever because they were so hard to do. So the Game Gear controls great. Controls great. In comparison to the Game Boy, huge difference. Huge difference. The controls were responsive. The fatalities were the same as they were, at least most of them, I think. I can't quite remember, but for instance, you know, Sub-Zero's fatality, forward down forward punch, is very easy to pull off, and you know, and they looked good and they were responsive. So Game Gear takes it. 4 out of 5 for controls, and you know, there's not really much more to be said about that. So. Overall fun factor, let's do one more match for each, and then determine the fun factor and the overall verdict for which one is better. There's going to be no surprises here, I don't think, anyways. But let's get into some gameplay and then talk about the fun factor and the overall verdict for which one is better. All right, overall fun factor is Game Boy Mortal Kombat 1 fun? Kind of gathering my thoughts there. I'm trying to think, is this fun? You know, when you're a kid and it's all you have, I can see it being fun. You know, being a huge fan of the arcade game and every other version out there, is this one still fun? I gotta be honest. No, it's not fun. It's frustrating. The fact that the controls suck make it even more frustrating. You know, if you're trying to pull off something quickly, like you're just not going to do it. There's no point in even blocking unless you know there's a projectile coming from way across the screen, because you're not going to be able to block anything anyways. The controls are that bad. Is this game fun? Not really. Not really. See if we can finish off Raiden. There is no pit fatality in this either. But this is a dumpster fire of a version. Now, the only one I think this was better than... Well, you know what? No, I'm not going to say that. But this is, like, I was just going to say, I'd almost rather play the Tiger handheld version. The Tiger version actually looks cool. But, anyways, let's see. Can we even beat Raiden? That's the thing. I don't know how the heck I beat this back in the day. I don't know how the heck I beat it. Beat it with Goro. I just... You know, you have more patience back then, I suppose. But again, something about that music. It's very catchy. But you can't tap back for the spear. Nope. Not at all. You gotta tap back, back, and then punch, and just hope for the best. Look at that, I even threw him. How the heck did I even throw him? It's almost like, you know, even if you button mash in this, chances are you're not going to get any moves off. Let's see, here we go. There we go. One more finisher to finish off this gameplay. That's pretty cool. All right, let's take a look at the Game Gear once more, see how much fun that one is, and then give our final verdict. All right, fun factor. Now this one, the Game Gear is actually missing the stage with the monks, and yeah. And the Game Boy had that included that. Maybe if the Game Boy took that out, they would have had more memory to make the controls a little better or something. But let's talk about fun factor. Is this fun? I tell you one thing, I'm having a lot more fun playing this than I did the Game Boy version. I think the Game Gear version for Mortal Kombat 1, I think this is a lot of fun. The controls are responsive, which really helps. You know, putting in that blood code, that makes it fun. When you were a kid and you had blood on your Game Gear screen, that was great. Gotta be honest, I'm having a fun time playing this version. A lot more so than Game Boy. Let's do one more finishing move. Look at that, you can even start putting the input in while you're jumping and it responds. That was a lot of fun. Let's talk about it, and then give our final verdict as to which version of Mortal Kombat is better. Alright, so there you have it. One last preview of each game before we make our final verdict. Now, the fun factor for Game Boy. Unfortunately, this game wasn't much fun. It was definitely no fun playing today, but back in the day, had a lot of fun with it. So at the time, it was decent for what it was. It's hard to have fun with a game like that when the controls are so bad. That makes all the difference in the world. I think the only joy that I would get now playing Mortal Kombat 1 for Game Boy is when I'm able to pull off a simple move, like, you know, Scorpion's Harpoon, or, you know, Sub-Zero's Ice. And then pulling off a finishing move, like I said, like that's a 1 in 20 chance, I think. It's so hard to do, but once you do it, there's your fun. So, you know, and the fact they let you use Goro if you were able to beat the game with a code afterwards, that was huge too. But I mean, who's gonna put the time in to play this ever again, anyways? You know, I play it for nostalgic sake and for the sake of this video, but Mortal Kombat 1 on the Game Boy was pretty terrible. It's terrible today. Back then it was terrible, but you know, when you're a kid, you know, you're more accepting, I think. And that being said, the fun factor for Game Boy, I'd give it a 2 out of 5, and even that's being generous. The overall score for the Game Boy is a 9 out of 20. And even that I think is generous, but it's Mortal Kombat, and maybe I'm being biased, so who knows? Now, as for the Game Gear fun factor, it plays well. You know, graphically, everything just comes together pretty nicely for the Game Gear version, as long as you put in that blood code, which I still remember to this day. BAB up down, or BAB down up, whatever it is. It's easy to, it's only 5 inputs. You put it in quickly. You guess, you know, which one it is. It'll eventually, you know, you'll eventually get it. Just from knowing that it's just BAB up down, or BAB down up, or ABA down up. It was one of them. I can't remember which it was that I did, but anyways, the Game Gear, having, you know, that blood code, the arcade fatalities, it plays well, it looks well. Obviously, I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5 for fun factor because of that. The only issue I have with it is, you know, it's missing a character, and so is the Game Boy, right? The Game Boy's missing Johnny Cage, and the Game Gear's missing Kano. Why they switched it like that, I don't know, but you know, not a big deal. So overall, I give the Game Gear a 15 out of 20. Game Boy gets a 9, which doesn't even really deserve that. So my final verdict is the Game Gear version of Mortal Kombat 1 was better. It was much better than the Game Boy version. Now, while the Game Boy, you know, if you take it on trips and stuff with just batteries, the batteries lasted a long time, so you were able to get through that frustration and that frustrating game if, you know, you had a long road trip ahead of you or something. Whereas the Game Gear, you know, lasted 45 minutes, so you had to have a battery pack for that. But that's, you know, anyways, that's more about the system itself. Overall, 15 out of 20 for Game Gear, 9 out of 20 for the Game Boy. Game Gear takes the cake. And that concludes the video. So thank you very much for checking it out. I appreciate it. And, you know, I'm enjoying doing these comparison videos, and I'm going to keep on bringing them, keep on bringing them out. And I hope you enjoyed it. Anyways, take care. Enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy the rest of your life. We will see you later in another video.